Will private money lending set me free though? These are the questions that need real answers, okay? And I am here to answer that for you. We're going to talk about private money lending and how it relates to actual long-term freedom. What does time leverage look like? What does having options look like? We're going to talk about having control over your capital and how that can play out in terms of achieving that long-term freedom that we are all looking for. Okay, I know some of us have it, but some of us are on our way. Okay, so when done intentionally, private money lending really does support freedom. And when I say freedom, I'm talking about freedom of time, freedom of money, just that real financial independence and freedom, right? And when I say financial independence, I'm talking about you being independent from an employer to earn your living, you being able to rely on just you, right? Or your investments for earning your living. And when I talk about financial freedom, it's a step beyond financial independence, right? So being able to not only cover all of your expenses on your own without depending on anyone else, but also being able to do things above and beyond your expenses, right? So it's one thing if I can cover my mortgage and, on my car note and groceries or whatever, but it's another thing if I also have a ton of money left over to travel or do charitable work or take my imaginary kids somewhere. I say imaginary because they don't exist yet, but one day they will, right? And I want to be able to have the freedom to do what I want to do with them. So what does this look like? How does private money lending get you there? First of all, one of my favorite things about private money lending is options, right? Just the ability to get involved or not get involved. And I know that sounds simple, but if you have money to loan out, people are going to want it from you. That's just how this industry works. It's very difficult for business owners and investors to get capital. They're always trying to figure out, how do we raise more capital? How do we fund this project? And if you are the person that has those funds, you can be very selective about who you want to work with, what types of deals you want to do, how long you want to be in them, etc. And I just love that, right? There's no shortage of funding needs. And I don't think there ever will be, right? There's always going to be someone running a business or doing some kind of investment who needs the funding for that project. I love having those options and being able to keep my standards and not lower them and be selective with who I want to work with and what types of deals I want to do. Now, that is key to freedom. Like I've heard someone say before, options is freedom, right? Like the lack of options is the lack of freedom. I totally agree with that. Another thing is the time leverage. So, a lot of investments that I've tried, especially real estate, are super time intensive. Okay. So, when I first started investing in real estate, I was told that it was going to be this passive thing and I was going to be owner of all these properties and I was just going to be collecting checks and month after month, just collecting checks. And look, I was young, I was naive, I didn't know. It turns out that's not true. And it could be the way that I invested in real estate. I don't know. I started off just buying single and multifamilies, renting them out, short, mid, long term rentals. And there was nothing passive about it. I mean, I would say of those strategies, the most passive was long term rentals. But even with a property manager, it's not been passive and it's still not passive. And so when I was exposed to this idea of not being the one doing the work, the hard, active work of real estate investing, but instead being on the other side and just being able to enable financially someone else to do that work. How come nobody told me about this? Like, why ain't nobody telling me this was an option? I mean, of course, eventually somebody told me, a stranger, but I never heard of that. I didn't know that was an option that I had. And when he was explaining it to me, he was like, because I was thinking about doing a fix and flip. He's like, you've never done a fix and flip. You're trying to do a fix and flip in a state where you're not there. So you're going to have to be managing contractors, dealing with calls, dealing with emergencies, all this stuff. You work full time. Like, is that something you really want to do? And I was like, I'm thinking about the returns, right? And I'm thinking it's worth the sacrifice. And he's like, yeah, but you can get those same returns or better if you just fund the project, right? You don't have to be the one on the phone with the contractors dealing with the emergencies and figuring out what to order and timelines and when it's going to sell. He's like, you don't have to deal with any of that if you just fund the project. And that just unlocked something in my mind. And I realized, like, hey, you're right. I don't really have time to do this. Like, you're right. I'm working full time. I'm also a real estate investor. I'm not even a parent yet. Like, imagine when I'm a parent too. Like, do I have the time and energy to be doing all this? He's like, you can just be the funder and you truly be just waiting for the checks to roll in. And I was like, huh. And so that really showed me what my life could look like as a passive private money lender. And of course, since then, I've learned about other passive forms of investment like real estate syndications and things like that. But the thing that distinguishes those from private lending from me is the control over the capital. I've been looking into syndications and I've been having a hard time seeing, I guess, like not the benefit, but just deciding like if it's something I want to do. Because with private money lending, I feel like I have more control over my capital and my earnings than I do or than I would with a syndication, right? Because with private money lending, I am a direct money lender. I am taking my own money, whether it's in an entity or my retirement or whatever, and I am loaning it directly to the investor or borrower, right? I'm not putting it in a fund as a limited partner and letting them do what they want, okay? And so there's something about having that connection, that direct connection to the investor and the borrower in the deal, and having a lien, right? I have a secured loan in case something goes wrong. So at the end of the day, I'm going to get my money or I'm going to get an asset or I'm going to get, paid out through a foreclosure or whatever. There's something about that assurance that makes me feel like I have more control than with something like a syndication, where if they blow the funds, if they lose the money, they just lose the money. And it's like you knew what the risks were, kind of thing. And I'm like, I don't really, I'm not interested in that, right? Like I don't want those kind of risks. I like the ability to choose and the ability to know where my money is and connect with the borrower directly about what's going on. So that's how I think about how private money lending supports my freedom, right? At a time in my life, in some years where I'm going to be doing things totally different. I'm going to be a parent, I'll be a wife still, just wanting to shift how I spend my time. I don't want to be answering tenant calls. Like I would rather just be in a loan or two and just waiting while I'm waiting, I can be doing other things, right? I can be being the Pilates mom that I was meant to be, you know? Like I could be doing that while I'm doing my private money loans. I could be traveling, and not taking those calls because they ain't gonna be calling me. They're gonna be calling the investor, the borrower. And so that's how I think about how private money lending supports freedom when done intentionally, right? So you have to set this up for your life. And the way that you can get to that freedom is through structure. So how you set up your private money lending structure, of course, on the front end, I always talk about it does take time on the front end to set that up. But once you've set it up, you're good to go, right? Like you can, of course, refine it and change it and improve it over time. But that initial setup is what's going to set you free for real. Okay.